Like all the other constructions on the outskirts of Mordor, this was built by the Gondorians at the beginning of the Third Age to keep the orcs out of Mordor, so that they would never be able to rebuild the stronghold of Sauron. And as it turned out, this didn't work quite well, and Sauron was very happy with having this gate in place, and he built all the spikiness and the whole design on top of the old foundations. So physically, it doesn't make sense that gates that are so huge can just open easily in a lever way of working. So the designer, I think, was John Howe. He created at the bottom of the gates these bigger pieces that you could imagine were hiding wheels, and so that way it would make sense that this gate could be opened the way that it is shown in the movie.
You just said something treeish.
No, I didn't. I was just stretching.
In the books, it is mentioned that the hobbits grow a bit taller and their hair gets more curly after drinking the Ent water. But it is something that was given to them by Treebeard in the book and not something forbidden or accidental. And there's no tree-ish talking involved either.
What's happening?
So this scene is reminiscent of the old willow man that is living in the old forest. So this is a scene that in the book takes place before they reach Bree, and it was taken over here for the extended edition. So also the words that Baumbart says in a minute, they are the ones that Tom Bombadil says in the book to get the old Willowman to release the hobbits.
Too few of us Ents left to manage them.
So the Ents are creatures that, like the eagles, were created by the gods as guardians of the trees, while a lot of the trees that are waking up now are called Huorns. So they are either trees that became more awake or Ents that became less awake, and they become trees who do not speak but who can move along and harm others. And it's something that the elves apparently started, talking to the trees and waking them.
You?
What do they look like?
In the book, when they take the boats along the river, they see the former gardens of the Entwives, which are now called the Brown Lands, and are just a huge area of desolation and destruction, something that is accredited to Sauron and his forces.
Edoras and the Golden Hall of Meadowseld.
The Golden Hall of Meadowseld is actually part of the saga of Beowulf, I think. At least it's one of the famous Old English sagas that speak of a golden hall, and Tolkien used that imagery and implemented it into the people of Rohan. They actually did build all of Edoras on the hill, where you can see it now. I don't think the surroundings are exactly as they are here, but this whole scene was filmed on a very windy day. That's why it really looks as if it was up in the mountains. In a few seconds you will hear a gong that sounds when Aragorn is looking up and sees that Eowyn is no longer there, where she was a second ago. This gong is played by Peter Jackson himself, so he learned how to play it properly, and I think it was the only instrument that he could learn easily enough to do it on the side. It's actually quite a defensible situation, so you could also imagine the last stand of Rohan being in Edoras, but they have other places which are far more fortified, and that's why they are later retreating to Helm's Deep and to Dunharrow. So here he sees her. A second later. Peter Jackson is a great musician.
Cannot allow you before Theoden King so armed, Gandalf Greyhame.
Greyhame is also a usage of an Old English word for skirt.
Why should I welcome you, Gandalf Stormcrow?
the Stormcrow attribute is something that is pushed as a narrative in Rohan and Gondor, that Gandalf is not coming in the time of need to aid people, but that he's coming when the misery is there to just enjoy himself while the others are in pain. Which is obviously not true.
I will draw you, Saruman, as poison is drawn from a wound.
Never draw poison from a wound. Very often when you suck out venom, you poison yourself. This scene is quite exaggerated compared to the books, where it's only hinted that Saruman is possessing him, but it's quite a useful means to make it clear to the audience. So it's one of the things I like that they changed. And also the way that they make Theoden look younger now is 4 stages of different makeup that they transition through, while Theoden keeps moving in the same way, so that it looks natural. Though in the book he is said to always have been old, at least at the edge of still being able to fight. Yeah, he does look a bit younger here than he's described as in the book. The poem that you will hear in a few seconds being recited by Eowyn is in Old English. As I said, it's the language of Rohan.
Ever has it grown on the tombs of my forebears.
In the background you can see the barrows where all his ancestors were buried, all the kings of the Riddermark. There are 2 lines, so on one side of the road and on the second. And with the death of his heir, there will be a 3rd line established afterwards when Theoden dies, which is the line of Eomer, who is not a direct descendant, but the nephew. So the population of Rohan is not living in a very centralized way. They do have the capital of Edoras, but throughout the land they would live in separated farmsteads and small villages. And that is why, on short notice, they cannot muster a larger force. And in the 3rd movie, where they do have time to muster them, they actually are able to create an army that is almost matching the one that they are fighting against in this movie.
You have 2,000 good men riding north as we speak. Eomer is loyal to you.
As I mentioned, Eomer was not exiled in the books, so in the books he is actually with them now, and there's no extra force that is going to the east out of Rohan.
We make for the refuge of Helm.
So it's not a big secret that Grima is revealing later, because it is the main fortress and they have fled there before. So even if Grima would have died, it would have been obvious to Saruman where the Rohirrim would go.
Look to my coming. At first light on the 5th day. At dawn, look to the east.
I never managed quite to count the days and night shifts here, so I will try to do it now to see if it's actually 5 days in the movie. Obviously in the theatrical version with a lot of things cut out, it does seem very short. I think it almost matches here in the extended edition. In the lore of Middle-earth, Elvish is usually described as a language that anybody and anything can understand. So in the books, Legolas even says that the stones in front of Moria remember the elves and dwarves, shaping them. And it's normal for elves to be able to talk to anything, because the Elvish is perceived as the most natural language.
He has seen enough of war.
It is the horse of Theodrad who died, so that's why it's so disturbed.
And yet, he bore a strange ring. 2 serpents with emerald eyes, one devouring.
It's amazing what Grima was able to see just from the small and short interaction. Yeah, Barah's ring was given to him in the First Age. He was one of the captains of men, and he was given it by Finrod Felagund, one of the kings of the elves, of the High Elves.
It is a dangerous road to take through the mountains.
So this first day is really long. I think it could be 2 days already. The splashes you see here were actually made by Andy Serkis. So this creates this strong interactivity between the CGI character and the environment.
Leave now and never come back!
This short victory of Smeagol over his Gollum side is also in the book, and it's also a very short-lived experience. Smeagol doesn't eat cooked food. In the book, Frodo and Sam are captured before the attack on the Southorns happens.
No one at home will believe this.
In the book, hobbits have tales of Oliphaunts, of strange creatures from southern lands that are very tall and grey.
David not rather have stayed there. In peace.
It's an important theme in the Middle-earth lore that men are rarely joining evil for the sake of evil. And it's even worse in the First Age when elves fought against elves, where you would never think that something like that could happen.
You cannot be 80.
87.
Aragorn lived to be 200 years old in the end. So he governed Gondor some 123 years.
It was said that your race had passed into legend.
There are few of us left. The Northern Kingdom was destroyed long ago.
So Aragorn can live so long because his line is of Númenórean descent. And the Númenóreans were the kings of men, the people who helped the elves fight against the first Dark Lord Morgoth. And for their fight they were rewarded by being granted a much longer lifespan than other humans. In this scene, Aragorn has almost grey eyes, and that is what he's supposed to have. It's a special property of the Númenóreans and also of Beren, after who he is kind of modeled because he's his descendant. In some of the scenes in the first movie, he seemed to have really strong blue eyes, and that's not really according to the lore.
It was a dream, nothing more.
The scene that we see here, this whole renouncing the love and everything, that is not part of the book. In the book, the idea of love is quite clear because the relationship between Beren and Luthien, which is mirrored in Arwen and Aragorn, is modeled after the love between Tolkien and his wife. And the idea that you would renounce it and go back and forth is not something that would have occurred to Tolkien, I think.
Mama? I'm not sure.
So the one who is about to die is called Hammer, one of the captains of the Riddermark. Maybe it's only the third one where things start to deteriorate. I think we will see in the Battle of Helm's Deep that, the archery is a bit... This small sidetrack where Aragorn seems to die and then appears later is also not in the book. In the book they also don't fight the wargs, they just arrive at Helm's Deep and then things go down from there. So Helm's Deep was created by one of the kings of Rohan called Helm Hammerhand. And I think some of the foundations might be Númenórean. I'll double check on that during the editing. But basically this was the refuge for Rohan during the long winter some few hundred years ago. I think it was 1500, it was probably 25th century of the Third Age. And there's a very small path towards the caves in the back, but you have so in the book it's described as if the burg was next to the entrance to the caves, and the caves are behind the wall, whereas here it is more shown as if the caves were behind the burg.
Saruman's arm will have grown long indeed if he thinks he can reach us here.
So the Battle of the Hornburg is set up in the book as the force of about 10,000 strong of the Uruk-hai and the Dunlendings and the Wargs together. And then on the side of the defenders, you do not get any elves joining, and you only have the people of Rohan, which are much more than depicted here in the book, depicted here. So here you have like 1,000 men of Rohan with 300 elves, but in the book it's said that they pick up stragglers from the third battle of the Fords of Eisen. This battle happens before the Battle of Helm's Deep, and it's the battle by which Saruman gains access towards Rohan, because he conquers the Fords of Eisen.
Its victory is at hand!
In the speech you will also notice how Christopher Lee says Rohan very clearly, not Rohan, because he knows how to pronounce Elvish correctly.
And will be stained with the blood of Rohan!
Rohan. So, since Éomer is not lagging behind and not returning from exile, in the book it's a different force that arrives with Gandalf, and that is because Gandalf at this point is leaving the others at Helm's Deep, where with people feeling a bit like he betrayed them. Then he goes to Isengard, which at this point is already conquered by the Ents, because it takes longer for the Uruk-hai to reach Helm's Deep than it takes Gandalf to ride to Isengard with Shadowfax. So things are a bit more out of sync here, because the two battles happen at the same time, Isengard and Helm's Deep. Well, in the book, the Battle of Isengard happens right after the Uruk-hai leave. Then Gandalf arrives and gives a few instructions to take care of Saruman, don't let him escape and stuff like that. Then he returns behind the army of Uruk-hai and gathers more survivors from the Battle of the Fords of Eisen, from the third battle. And that is why when the dawn breaks, you get this huge army that attacks the Uruk-hai from the rear. And only because of the clashing of two forces, the good guys riding out of Helm's Deep and Gandalf and the others coming from behind, is it that Isengard's army is routing. Now I wonder if I have missed one of the nights already, but I don't think so. I think this is still a long day, and maybe initially they used to have some scenes at night for the first night, but obviously this would be too much that happened for one day. So this is nighttime, so I would say, when counting strictly, that this is the first night that passes since Gandalf left. So in the Fourth Age, which started after the fall of Sauron, Arwen did actually live longer than Aragorn. So Aragorn died when he was 210 years old, and Arwen then saw kingship pass on to her son, her firstborn son. I think they had more than one, but I can't remember quite now. And then she went to the forgotten forests of Lothlorien, which were deserted by the time, and laid down there and died.
Men who are so easily seduced by its power. The young captain of Gondor has but to extend his hand, take the ring for his own, and the world will fall.
Here you see the Gondorians and the hobbits reaching the window to the west, Heneth Anun, which is a refuge in Ithilien, where they are hiding.
Saruman attacks from Isengard.
The hand that you see here is the hand of Peter Jackson, because he was alone when shooting this tiny extra with the map where you just have the 2 fingers, 2 points where the finger indicates. So Heneth Anun is an outpost in Ithilien. You can see the waterfall in the background that is falling on top of the whole mountain range and then down into the pool where Gollum will be swimming later.
We set out from Rivendell with 7 companions.
So Faramir knows of the prophecy that appeared to his family in dreams, and that is why Rivendell and the whole companion thing is not unknown to him.
It would grieve you then to learn.
This interaction in the book happens still out there, and I think it is after the attack on the Southrons, but before they move to Heneth Anun. and Frodo is questioned at that point already. But Faramir sees that the answers that Frodo would have to give lead towards dangerous subjects, such as the ring. He doesn't understand that it's the ring yet, but he understands that he has to stop the questioning, and he continues in a much more relaxed manner at Heneth Anun. And that is the only thing that actually happens concerning Faramir in the Two Towers. That Faramir learns from a slip of tongue of Sam that they have the ring. Then he gets this vision of the power he could have and the honor he could get. But after a split second, he lets it go and just says, oh, it must have been too much of a task for Boromir. And that shows the difference between Faramir and Boromir. Now that Boromir is preserved in the boat after falling down the waterfall of Raudos is in the book, and it's accredited to the properties of the elven boats, that they do not sink and do not dive underwater. Osgiliath was reclaimed some 10 years ago, I think, before the time of the Lord of the Rings.
And music, and so it shall be once more!
Of course, the things that Boromir hopes for here did not really occur. The city is in ruins. It has been in ruins for probably some thousands of years. It fell into decay once that the ring race returned, which was long before Sauron himself was observed to have returned. And the ring race took Minas Ithil, which it became Minas Morgul. That is the city that Frodo, Sam and Gollum will go to in the third movie. Yeah, and then basically there was war constantly over Osgiliath. The city was depopulated, fell into ruin, and constantly won back and forth by each side.
Men are thirsty!
It looks like they have good ale there. Denethor was stricken with grief at the death of his wife. I think the wife, which was called Finduilas, only lasted 10 years through the marriage, because she was coming from the people at the south coast, near to Dol Amroth, and she basically didn't really live well in the castle of Minas Tirith, and she faded there. And it's somehow a connection between Denethor and the death of Finduilas, where Denethor blames Faramir to some extent. I'm not sure if she died in childbirth, maybe, but she definitely died very early. And Denethor never really got over that.
Sauron is biding his time. He's massing fresh armies. He will return.
So here you see why Boromir started his saying at the council by "Give Gondor the mighty weapon of the enemy." This was basically the will of his father. So Denethor is also one of the, because they are all descendant of Númenor, he's also a far-sighted person, but most of his gift went into Faramir, which is something that he cannot see because of his grief. And Boromir is actually someone who is not that wise and not that much reminiscent of the glory of Númenor. He's more the valiant warrior that fights for his people. He's a great captain. He's much more suited for war than Faramir, but it's just a different kind of character. In the book, Sam wakes up as soon as Frodo leaves because he's very attuned to anything that happens to his master. So he comes sneaking after and just observes the whole thing. I think it's even written from the point of view of Sam. So if you've ever tried archery, you might know that it's impossible to stand at position at full draw and wait for a command. Usually what you would do is you draw it 3/4 to a point where you can comfortably hold it, and then when the command to shoot goes, you go to full draw, anchor, and then release.
Trustmaster, come!
So poor Smeagol obviously interprets this as a trap, and that is how this whole relationship between Frodo and Smeagol is riven asunder.
Follow me, come on! Come.
But for Frodo, there was really no other way to save him, because he would have killed if he wasn't to be captured. Because in the book, Faramir explains this a bit further, that he doesn't trust the creature who so easily slips away and escapes. And it's only the fish that managed to catch him.